Hello, and welcome everyone to Meet the Music. I'm your host, Thomas Corley. Thank you for listening. This week, we are continuing our series, The Many Sounds of the Caribbean, here in our third season. This episode, we are featuring bachata. Joining me for insight is Dr. Julie Sellers. Dr. Sellers is an associate professor at Benedictine College. She was named the Kansas World Language Association's Teacher of the Year in 2017. She was awarded the Guy Alexandra Paper Prize by the Latin American Studies Association of Haiti, Dominican Republic, section in 2020, and named the 2020 Poise Writer of the Year by Kansas Authors Club. Dr. Sellers has published 3 books, The Modern Bachata Teros, Merengue and Dominican Identity, and Bachata and Dominican Identity, which is the essence of today's conversation. Dr. Sellers, welcome to Meet the Music.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
So, just one silly question. So how does a young lady from the Midwest fall in love passionately with bachata?
I always say it is because I am from the Midwest. I grew up on the family farm in Kansas, and there wasn't a lot to do. And so I started reading, and I always wanted to travel to all of those fascinating places that I'd read about. And I thought one really good way to do that would be to study foreign languages. So I took 4 years of Spanish in high school and 2 of French, and then I majored in Spanish and French in college. And as a result of that, I was able to spend the summer after my second year of college in the Dominican Republic. And of course, bachata and merengue are both Dominican musics. And when I was there for the entire summer, I was completely surrounded by this music, filled with this music, and I fell in love with the culture. Not just the music, but that was, of course, a very big part of it.
That's very cool. Wow. So, being there for a summer, did you frequent, I guess, I don't want to say, were there nightclubs or?
Not so much at that time, but we had friends who would play music. I mean, this is something you can dance anywhere. People dance just because they enjoy the sound of it. And unlike the U.S., where we might say, oh, in a neighborhood, you better turn your music down. If there's music playing, everybody in the neighborhood may enjoy it, or they will get together informally. And so our friends would play music, and they of course wanted to teach us to dance. And they said, "Don't worry if you can't do it, because we have this in our blood, and you have to you have to really be born with it and feel it. But you're doing fine. Keep it up." So that was mainly my lessons.
Oh, okay. So you carry that on through your years in college, and then now you had the spark to write about it. How did that all come about?
Well, I first decided to write about merengue because I had done some work looking at questions of identity. And that whole idea of being told we have this in our blood really stuck with me even all those years later. And I thought, why is that? So I wanted to see what the historical origins of merengue were. And as I studied it, I began to see the connections with much bigger questions of class, questions of politics, because it was used as propaganda during the dictatorship of Rafael Trujillo. And all of that then influenced bachata, which came later. And so first, just being surrounded by merengue, being told it's in our blood, hearing bachata, wondering how these two musics went hand in hand in the Dominican Republic, led me to want to explore that and research both of the genres. And then the modern bachateros, that book focuses mainly on this multicultural bilingual music that is produced primarily in the U.S. by Dominican Americans. And they've taken the genre of their heritage, bachata, and mixed in different aspects of their reality, bilingualism, R&B, hip-hop. And that was fascinating to me too, especially as a language professor, to see how language is so integral to culture, and how with the bilingualism, when there's code switching, that's just part of the everyday reality of many people in this country.
Yeah. Wow. So, with the demise of the leader in the 60s, was it exported, the music exported at that time?
Not for quite a while. The music there's always a little bit of debate. When exactly is a genre born? But bachata, often we look at 1962, which was a year after the assassination of Rafael Trujillo. And the very first pioneer, as they call him, el pionero de la bachata, was José Manuel Calderón. And he produced a song all on his own. He paid out of pocket to rent the studio time. And he and his band recorded this song on a record. And looking back, we say, okay, that's probably where you can say that's one of the first, if not the first, bachata. But he really thought it was just a bolero. He was interpreting bolero, which was popular across all of Latin America and had been for a number of years, interpreting it with a smaller group, using guitars, not a big band, and just interpreting it in his own style, which had a lot more of what we would describe probably as a bluesy feel. And at the time, all of these interpretations, what they were considering bolero de guitarra, bolero played on guitar, it wasn't anything new. It was just a different interpretation, but it was primarily done by people who had come from the countryside to the cities following the demise of Trujillo. And because they were associated with campesinos, the country folk, and lower classes, it was very much discriminated against. Again, we can draw a parallel to the blues in that regard. And so it was kept off of mainstream radio. It was kept off of the large venues because merengue was so firmly entrenched with those record labels and with the better venues and the bigger venues, it just didn't get an inroad for a number of years. It's a long process. It had a large fan base. It was played especially on Radio Guarachita, a radio station founded in 1966 by Radamés Aracena. And it had that community feel. It had that body of fans. It was just really discriminated against for quite some time.
So, I mean, it has that kind of that bad vibe like hip hop had when it was trying to break through. And so that's kind of from the streets, but then not really accepted in commercial radio for a while. So that's very interesting that it has those parallels.
Yes.
Yeah.
In fact, I'd say it got even worse. Excuse me. In the 1970s, the late 70s and early 80s, there was quite a strand of double entendre bachata, and that didn't endear it to any of the middle class or upper class listeners either, because it was really thinly double-veiled double entendre. But then in the 80s, there were some changes. There were some new interpretations. And then moving even into the 90s, just some of the innovation. It kept growing. It kept garnering fans. And I've had musicians describe it to me as just like a little stream that starts out as a trickle of water. And then as it goes down the mountain, it picks up steam. That's what bachata is.
Oh. So, not being familiar with the migration of Dominicans to the stateside, is that, do you think that's part of the adoption here in the United States? In what time period, what decade do you think that actually occurred?
Trujillo controlled immigration greatly. He feared that any of his dissidents would leave and then go somewhere else and form a coup and come back and overthrow him. So it was very much controlled. After his death, there were changes to the U.S. immigration system, and that also contributed to opening the doors. Joaquin Balaguer, who eventually after some different political happenings, eventually became the president, really liked to use immigration more as a safety valve. And so people were able to immigrate in greater numbers. The changes to U.S. immigration policy helped draw them in. And the Dominican people did continue to come, but they often went back. So we talk about the Dominican community as a transnational community because there's a circular movement. There was a lot of people coming and going. At first, many people would come and try to work so that they could retire back in the Dominican Republic. They often sent money back. And so in addition to the movement of people, you have the movement of music and the movement of culture going in the circular, importing and exporting from both places. It really wasn't until in the 90s when younger generations started to listen to bachata, and sometimes their parents would say, I had one musician tell me, hey, we don't listen to that stuff in our house. No way. but he didn't know why. He'd hear it in the community, he liked it, and they started to interpret it and put their own spin on it with the adding in Spanglish, adding in the sounds of their reality. Growing up in New York, there were a lot of different sounds surrounding them, and they started to make it their own. So they'd do covers, they'd write their own songs, and there are a lot of different groups that were doing this. Many people will have heard of Aventura, and they're the ones that first really hit on mainstream radio in 2002 with Obsesión. And then that kind of opened the door for some of these other younger people who were experimenting with the music. And that's the group we call the modern bachateros.
Okay. Now, it's not scientific or anything like this, but what I've noticed just on YouTube, and I'm sure it's probably some numbers behind this, but when I look at the views on anything Latin, the numbers are through the roof compared to any other listen to genre of music or English speaking or anything like that. The numbers are in the billions. I mean, the only other person I can think of, at least, and he's not even American, he's Canadian, Justin Bieber. His numbers are like in the billions. But it's just amazing to me that around the world that Spanish or Latin culture is so strong. And I guess everyone in America is kind of in a bubble when it comes to stuff like that. So you mentioned Romeo's group, because I saw that he's like the king of it, and then you got some guy named Prince. These guys are like the champions of this genre of music. So then across the country, I mean, where are the pockets, I guess, of Dominican demographics, and then how do you find yourself getting your daily dosage of bachata?
Well, of course, the largest group you will find in New York. Dominicans have surpassed Puerto Ricans as the largest Latino group in New York City.
Is that right?
That is true. Also, in the Lawrence, Massachusetts area. Again, because of migration, there was kind of a chain migration where some families went and more people went and were filling jobs. And so there's a pretty large group there. Miami also has a pretty large group. But when you talk about this music, you will find these performers performing all over the place. I live near Kansas City, and since I've lived here in the last 2 years, I've seen Romeo Santos twice in Kansas City. I've seen Prince Royce in was it Sioux Falls? Now I can't remember. I've seen him. They tour, and sometimes they're larger venues, sometimes they're smaller venues. But even some of the smaller bars, I know there have been some different musicians who've played in the Kansas City area. And if you just follow on social media, you'll see they're going to these smaller locations perhaps, but they're still playing. As far as how I get my daily dose, thank heavens for the internet. It's a lot different than the first time I went to the Dominican Republic, and it was always a question of borrowing CDs or, well, back then cassettes from friends. But I listen online, and I listen to satellite radio. I listen to Spotify, and of course I have my playlist of all the good old songs that bring me good memories, and I listen to the new ones. And I follow a lot of these artists on social media so that I know when they have something new. For quite a while, pre-pandemic, there was a wonderful show online from the Dominican Republic on Facebook Live. It was called El Tieto Es Show. I love that show. The Paredes family put it together, and they highlighted different artists every evening, and you could just watch on Facebook Live. So hopefully post-pandemic we can have more things like that too.
Yeah. Now, is there a kind of a Mecca festival that people can gather at?
I'm not sure that I could point to one. And there are kind of differences between like listening or going to concerts to listen to the music and the dance world. The dance world in this country or internationally is more like competitive dance, and it is often quite different from what you might find. A very popular place to dance bachata is a car wash. They also have like bar and dance floor in the Dominican Republic, so it can be kind of different. I would say it would depend on if someone were more interested in listening to music or if they were going to watch or participate in the dance competitions. But I think if you're interested in bachata, social media is an easy way to find out what's going on in your area.
Well, the thing, I mean, you mentioned this parallel or this comparison of the dance world to bachata and then the singing of it or instrumental side of it. And I kind of find that with music in the Caribbean is like that because of reggae kind of started off as a dance and then it became a genre of music. And I mean, how do you see the evolution of it? You mentioned also that I'm going to kill the word, bachateros.
Mm-hmm.
They are fusing the music with with R&B and hip hop. So, what's your take on the future of it?
Oh, I think I'm going to quote some of the artists from the interviews I've done with them. The future is fantastic. They like to describe the different colors of bachata. And I think that's a very apt description because even though it has a base, it has its tradition, it has its typical instruments, there is a lot that can be done with it. And they've proven that by adding in the different sounds, by adding in Spanglish. There is a fantastic group based out of Switzerland doing bachata. They've added in some Italian and German. You can see people from all around the world. I have friends on Facebook who are dancers from Israel. There's no stopping it. So I like the description that they often use of all of the different colors of bachata. And I remember I asked that same question to one artist when I was working on my first book on bachata. I said, what do you think the future of bachata is like? And he said, it's unstoppable. And it does seem to be. It seems like it's constantly growing. It's reaching new fans worldwide, whether they're listening to the music or whether they want to learn to dance it. You see people all around the world posting themselves dancing to their favorite songs. And some of them are beginners, and some of them have practiced and become experts in the dance world. It does seem to be like it is, like the one artist described it. It started out as a trickle of water, and as it rushed down the mountain, it's gathered force.
Yeah.
The people listening to it, even non-Dominican Spanish-speaking groups or non-Spanish speakers, they don't know any of the baggage that bachata brought with it. Now, it's incredibly popular. It still faces some discrimination sometimes back home. You know how things are. It always takes longest sometimes back home for something to become popular. But these other groups don't know. I would say this much, having been twice at a Romeo concert in Kansas City, they do the shout-outs. Where are the Mexicans? Where are my Dominicans? Where are the largest group in attendance because of the demographics of the Kansas City area? They were shouted for Mexico and held up Mexican flags. They like the sound of the music. It has a very soulful, emotional pull. Even if you don't understand the words, you'll like it. And I know I've certainly been in different situations and different events where I've seen people who don't understand a word of Spanish, but they like the music and they want to dance to it. And so I think in the Midwest in general, as across the country, just that pull and that the presence of it, it is mainstreamed now, really is going to help it flourish among a lot of different groups. And you can find, I mean, that's social media. You can find a group for anything, anywhere.
Right, that's true. Yeah, it's interesting as you say that because I was talking to a gentleman in another show about the blues, and we were talking about the sounds around the world. And I told him, I said, look, I don't know if this is just me being a music geek, but I'm not bilingual, and I just love music from around the world. I mean, I just listen to any and everything, and like you said, I mean, people who find themselves not understanding the lyrics, but love the music, and that's how I am. And if I can capture the emotion from a video, that's even more. I mean, it's even more for me to support the love of that sound. Yeah. So, were you able to come up with a list?
Yes, I was. I have two. I have more of the typical, and these are just some. I'll explain why I picked them.
Yes, please do.
So, under the typical, the more traditional, I picked Luis Segura, Pena. Pena came out, I think, in 1983, and it has just a heart-wrenching sound to it. If you want to hear some earlier, not the earliest, but some earlier bachata that really gets to that sense of bitterness, and it was called Music or Songs of Bitterness, Luis Segura, Pena would be it. It's often covered, and if it starts playing, Dominicans sing along. They know it. So that is why I picked Pena. Another one I picked, this is just because I like it. Raulín, Raulín Rodriguez, Medicina de Amor. And that's another one that it really has that sound that is so typically bachata, the almost sobbing, the almost heart-wrenching sound. It's a little older. He has one that came out a couple years ago that I really like too, Corazón con Candado. And if you listen to those two, same artist, different sound, just with the time. One thing you'll find is there haven't been as many women in bachata as men. That's because of its early associations with the streets and with cabarets and brothels and not so savory places. So a lot of it has taken longer and it's been harder for women to get involved. But a very interesting sound was the duo Monchi y Alexandra. So a male-female duo. They're no longer together. She's singing on her own now and has a fantastic voice. But I have always loved Monchi y Alexandra. No es una novela. It has a beautiful sound, and I just like it. Another song that I really like is Frank Reyes, Amor a Distancia. And I remember having a conversation with the record store owner about this song, and he was talking about all the multiple interpretations it can have. For me, it has a really good sound. It just kind of has that pull at your heartstrings sound. But it could be talking about someone who is part of the Dominican transnational community, separated, somebody who's just distant in another way. It's a really great song, and I love the sound of it. And another favorite, still in that typical group, is Joey Veras. I really like pretty much anything Joey Veras does. I think he has a great sound. But one of my favorite songs is El Molde, the mold. And it's kind of the idea of they broke the mold when they made you. So it's a very sweet song and a sweet sounding song. And I think it's sweet. I like it for that reason. Joey Veras was one of the first to really kind of turn to that slightly softer, more romantic sound and a little bit less like crying. And he just does wonderful work. So those are the songs that I would pick. And if you start listening to those, it's kind of like going down the rabbit hole. You'll discover other songs by Joey Veras or other songs by Frank Reyes, other songs from the group that Raulín Rodriguez really belonged to, of three musicians who came from the borderlands and started innovating. Raulín Rodriguez, Anthony Santos, Luis Vargas. You start listening to one of these artists and one of these songs and you'll find others.
So that's what we're all about here on this show, going down the rabbit hole.
Exactly. So for the modern, this is really hard too. But of course you can't talk about modern bachata without talking about Aventura. Their first song that really hit was Obsesión, but one that I like even better is Cuando Volverás. And I like that because it has the Spanglish, and it's that early modern. It still sounds a little bit more like the typical, other than one of the main hallmark defining elements is that Spanglish. And so it's really fun to listen to hear that early modern. Prince Royce, Stand By Me, was a huge hit. It also has a really nice video. It's a feel-good video, and it is a really beautiful bilingual cover of that classic song. This one I think of a lot on Monday mornings. It is by a group I interviewed, Bolero, and they have a song that was called I Don't Want to Work. And it says, I don't want to go to work. And it's a bilingual bachata, and some days that's just how I feel. So I like that one just because it makes me, even if it's a day I'm like, oh, I'm so tired, I don't know if I can drag myself in. It makes me smile, and I can drag myself in. Now, I'm kind of cheating on the last two for the modern. I'm going to give you an album. And they're both albums that have different artists collaborating. My friend S.P. Polanco, a fantastic producer, did an album called Bachata Rising, and he included a lot of up and coming artists. So there's a huge variety, and it
Was it
had
like a compilation or?
these were artists who they're not Romeo Santos yet, but they have a unique sound and they're doing really great things and they're rising. They're on the rise, and so it's a number of different artists, yes, in one album, in the Bachata Rising, and it has all that really fresh sound. And similarly, Romeo Santos, his latest album, Utopia, Aventura got back together for a song, but then he did collaborations with a number of artists, and several of whom I've mentioned, Monchi Alexandra, Raulín Rodriguez, Frank Reyes, and others. And so it's really interesting to hear that fusion of some of the more typical with Romeo as the modern bachatero that he is. So those are the songs and albums I would recognize or recommend.
Yeah, well, thank you for that list, a very extensive list. So, question for you though, I noticed trying to research and stuff like that, covers. I saw quite a few covers of songs that are popular. Is that something that's customary for them, the singers?
I think that has often happened in music. I know sometimes artists across bachata's history would take songs from a similar type of genre. So like Mexican ranchera is similar in that it's blues. Vallenato, sometimes you'll have people cover vallenatos because it's already somewhat similar. And then you're talking like the cover, Prince Royce's cover of Stand By Me. I think that kicked off a whole tendency even to take these classic songs and see what they'd sound like in bachata and in a bilingual format. Again, bachata is just so easily adaptable. It can take so many themes and it can take interesting sounds. It can combine languages and make something truly unique. And I think that's probably what's adding to that.
Because I mean, well, let me see, how do I say this? My musical taste growing up was broad compared to my friends. But doing this show, I'm finding how much of a novice I am and just completely. So if I ask a question, that seems kind of obvious, I apologize for that. But I just want to be able to have, for myself and my listeners, to understand the whole genre itself. So is there anything that I didn't ask that you can add that would benefit somebody who you met a dinner gathering, and instead of talking about the weather, they ask you what's on your playlist, and you say, "Oh, 1 second,
Exactly.
let me share with you."
I think I would go back to the first guitar, which is requinto, and its importance, because as I mentioned, the first bachatas were really covers of boleros sung with guitars, and in this more of a bluesy or sobbing interpretive style. The guitar really becomes another voice, and often the singer will call on the guitar and will say, "Llora guitarra," cry guitar. And it's played by thumb picking. It is amazing. I just love to listen to bachata and just even really focus, instead of on the words, focus on the instrumentation, especially that first guitar where it's that beautiful thumb pick sound. And I think that's important because it adds a voice, it adds a level, and it is amazing to me how these musicians can make that instrument speak, especially since most of them have had no formal training. They're self-taught. And for someone who took piano lessons for 15 years, starting, in first grade, took piano lessons, that is amazing to me. I can read music, but I don't play by ear. I don't have that innate skill. And to hear them and hear what they can create, all of these, again, to use their term, all of these colors, all of these voices, all of these sounds, I think that is really central to what bachata is and to its expressive quality.
Oh. Well, thank you again for that. I mean, because I want to be able to have these conversations translate to listeners to where, they can take a selection of artists and then, add to their playlist. And then, like you said, kind of like myself growing up as a kid. Let me start by saying I don't have any musical skills, reading, writing, playing, or anything. All I know how to do is grab a piece of vinyl, open up the jacket, read the liner notes, and see who the sound engineer is and see who the guitarist is, and then follow those guys, the producer of that album, and follow those guys to the next one. So that's kind of how I, went from, listening to R&B, soul, jazz, to house music and bachata now. So, so that's my musical journey. And I just want people to be able to learn from somebody who's an expert, expand their horizons on music, and not be monomusical.
Exactly.
So I appreciate that. So do you have anything up and coming that you'd like to share? Now, this episode will be loaded up probably sometime in June. So do you have anything coming up?
I don't have anything related to bachata coming up, but of course, I have done presentations for different groups, and with all of us being experts in Zoom, I expect I will continue to look out different ways I could connect with people and do talks using Zoom or using technology in any way. My next project...
Are you writing?
I am writing. I have an article that will come out next year about El Tieto show that I mentioned. That's bachata related, but I've been doing some creative writing. And I actually have a chapbook of poetry coming out in June.
Oh, okay. All right. Do you have a title for it?
I do. The title is Kindred Verse, Poems Inspired by Anne of Green Gables. So completely different from bachata, but again, like you said, it's always wonderful to see all of the different interests and the different musics and the different arts that we all have that make us up as one big library.
Right. So we'll have a link to your other books on our website, and as of this recording, we are in 33 countries organically, and it's within 6 months, and
Amazing.
it's just it really truly is that people are kind of hungry for this journey, this musical journey that we're taking. So I appreciate that. Was there anything else that maybe that I didn't ask that maybe you think the listeners might be interested in?
I think it's all interesting. I think one of the things I think I probably ought to mention, sometimes people will have heard of Juan Luis Guerra, and he is a very well-known Dominican musician, and he has done all different kinds of sounds. He's done merengue, bachata, he's done some salsa. A lot of times people who aren't familiar with the history of bachata will say, oh, I know all about bachata because I've heard Juan Luis Guerra. Or they might say, oh, it was awful until Juan Luis Guerra. He has said, I've heard him say on interviews, that he's not a bachatero. He didn't grow up in that setting. He did bachata. He was middle class. He was formally trained. He did bachata, but he wasn't bachata. I think what he did was beautiful. I love his music. I think I have everything he ever did. But it's important to remember that at the same time, he and some other trained musicians such as Victor, Sonia Silvestre were working with what they called techno bachata. The more traditional ones, and I mentioned those three, Raulín Rodriguez, Luis Vargas, Anthony Santos, they were making some innovations that was really helping to push it out in the mainstream too. And so kudos to Juan Luis Guerra. He's an awesome musician, but I would always like to correct that thought that he's like saved bachata in some way or was a silver bullet that saved it. He was part of the history, but not the only part of it.
Thank you for adding that. Well, Dr. Julie Sellers, I thank you so much for coming on Meet the Music and sharing your expertise on bachata.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure, and I look forward to listening to your show.
All right. Appreciate it. Have a good summer.
You too.
Okay. I want to thank Dr. Julie Sellers for sharing the history of bachata and her passion for the genre. I hope you enjoyed the episode. I am definitely going to further my listening to bachata. Please be sure to check out her writings. We'll have a link to her writings on our website. As always, please share this episode and your favorite episode with someone who wants to expand their playlist. They can listen directly from our website, meetthemusic.buzzsprout.com, or wherever they get their podcasts. If this was your first episode, be sure to listen to our most downloaded episode on Zydeco with Michael Tesserand, or start at the beginning of this series with Heather Augustine on ska. Thank you so much for joining us on our musical journey. Remember, if it's Monday, it's Meet the Music.